Okay, welcome back. From the previous portion, we have actually learned how to write the code for a in-place insertion sort. And so this is the code that we'll be using for the question 5 and 6 we'll be discussing here. Okay, before I go on to talk about question 5 about sorting by age, now let's take a look at the sequence here. Let's say we have sequence 1, and in order for us to uh, compare the ages, we have to iterate through this sequence. Okay, so for element in sequence 1, let's say I were to print element. Okay, you realize that you are getting actually the whole tuple of the individual person. Now, if I need the age, I will have to indicate the index as 1 because that's the second element, and that will print out the ages. Now, this can be done in another way by writing a getter. So let's say I define get age. Now, get age of a person. Okay, so every element, every tuple is actually a person. So I just need to return the tuple person, the index one. So now instead of trying to get the ages of the individual element, I can now use the helper function called get age of the person, and that will do the same thing. Okay, so in the same line, if I want to get the gender, I can do that too. Okay, and that will be index 0. Okay, and besides, instead of getting the age, I can get the gender. Okay, so you must learn how to use things like this. So let me copy the get age before I write the insertion sort to sort the age. Okay, we are going to use insertion sort, so I'm going to copy from our previous algorithm, okay, our code that we have written in our previous lesson. Okay, instead of comparing the whatever element from the previous one, we are now going to compare the age, right? So we are going to get the age of this person compared to the age, sorry, get age of the previous person. Okay, so in this case, if your age is smaller than the previous person, you get shifted. Okay, you get swapped. Okay, let's run that, and I'm going to run this code for the sequence 4. Okay, so you realize that the ages are sorted according in an ascending order. Okay, but referring to the question itself, you are required to sort and return a list that's older people in the front. So we want it to be older people in the front. That means the decreasing order. So I just need to change this comparison and make it as bigger. Okay. If your age is bigger than the other person, then you shift. Okay. So that will give you a decreasing order. Okay. So there you go. You have the ages on 35, 30, and so on until 17. Okay, we'll copy this code for question number 6. Now in question number 6, we are asked to include a comparison. Okay, please bear in mind we are talking about comparison. I'll talk about number of swap later on. Now, in order to count the number of comparison, I will need a counter. So let me initialize a counter here. Let me call this compare. And I set it to 0. Okay. So as I go into the code, I actually get various lengths of the array, starting from 1 element, then go on to 2 elements, and so on. I probably have done the comparison over here. And well, there is a problem here. If I were to add a compare and increase by 1 over here, um, and then later on return the compare here. Now when we return two um, values, it will return as a tuple. Okay, let me try to run this code for sequence 4. You realize that there are 5 comparisons. But for our test case in question 6, to sort the age and then return the number of comparison for sequence 4, it is 10. There are 10 comparison here. Okay. So in some way we have undercount the number of comparison. Now this arises because we have combined two conditions in our while loop. So I'm going to modify the insertion sort here. If you recall, previously as I wrote the insertion sort, I combined the two conditions so that we can break off from the while loop. Now I'm going to separate the two conditions here now. While I bigger than 0, if the get age of this person is bigger than the previous person, then we do the swap. Else, we don't do the swap and we break, okay, out from the while loop. This is what we have written previously. So now, for the compare counter, I will put it before the if condition. Now what this means is that after getting into the while loop itself, just before I do the comparison, I increase my counter. Okay, now I cannot put the counter inside the if condition because that will only happen if there is a swap being made. Okay, so I just put the counter before the if condition, and that will help me to count the number of comparison made. Let's run this for sequence 4. There it goes. You have 10 comparison. Okay. So I'm going to continue from here. Let me copy the same code. This is something extra. The cosmology question did not ask for the number of swap, but I thought since we are talking about swap, uh, I might as well just go through this. So I'm going to set a counter called swap. So when did the swap occur? The swap occur when you after the comparison in this if condition, the swap would increase by 1, and after that we return the swap. So this particular counter will help us find out the number of swap being made. Okay, same thing I'm going to run for sequence 4. So out of the 10 comparison that are being made, 5 of them result in a swap. Okay, so that's what it means. Okay, that's all for this lesson on the insertion sort.